and she will talk about the triviality of the affine threefold. This is part two of her talk, and she will, I hope, will recall the basic concepts that she presented in the first talk first. So, Nina, you can start your talk now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I will recall a few concepts which we have discussed in our previous talk. First, let me tell you what is our problem. So, the problems which we are trying to investigate is this threefold, which is given by a linear polynomial in y. This is with coefficient x to the power m. And we will be discussing most of the results will be for m greater than 1. Few lemmas and proposition do hold for m equal to 1 also, but the main actual thing holds for m greater than 1. So this is the ring which we are studying. K will always be a field, and irrespective of the characteristic, it may be any field, finite, infinite, algebraically closed, doesn't matter. And the problems which we are investigating is to find some necessary and sufficient conditions on this polynomial f, which is a polynomial in three variable f, x, z, t, for which this ring A is going to be a stably polynomial ring. That is, after adding one more variable, it becomes a polynomial ring in four variables, and for which A is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in three variables. So this xyzt is just an isomorphism, it's not the same xyzt. So the problem is to find criterion for which criterion on this capital F for which A is going to be a stably polynomial ring, A is itself a polynomial ring, and this polynomial is a linear polynomial in Y, is a variable or a coordinate in the polynomial ring kxyzt. This is the original kxyzt. So when can this be a polynomial in kxyzt? A very easy observation can be, see for instance fxzt, if it is just z, then z minus x to the power my, you can easily make it to be a coordinate, and then all these three conditions will be true. For instance, this, if A is a polynomial ring, A is of course a stably polynomial ring, and if this y minus fxzt, if this is a variable, then both the above two conditions hold, that A is going to be a polynomial ring as well as this will happen. So this is the weakest, the first one, then this is little stronger, and this is the most strongest uh, observation question which I am asking, where when will this be true? So we recall a few definition and notations. So throughout my talk, K is a field, and for an integral domain R and B, we will use this notation B equal to R square bracket n to mean that B is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in n variables over R. That is, B is R T1, T2, Tn for some algebraically independent elements T1, T2, Tn in B. So this is a very standard notation which I will be using throughout the talk, because this talk is about polynomial rings, stably polynomial rings. So this is very standard, R square bracket n. Let me recall a few definitions. A definition of a non-trivial line. A polynomial f in kzt is said to be a non-trivial line if kzt polynomial ring in one variable, but but f is not a coordinate in kzt. Then f will be called a non-trivial line. We will soon see that such a non-trivial line does not exist in characteristic 0, and but there are non-trivial lines in positive characteristic. This is where the only characteristic do come in the picture, that non-trivial lines exist in positive characteristic but not in characteristic 0. An R algebra A is called an AN fibration over R if A is a flat and finitely generated over R, satisfying all the fiber rings of A over R is a polynomial ring in n variables. So it's a geometric concept which says that if the base ring R at all the points of the spec R, the fibers are polynomial ring, and for smoothness condition we have flatness, and we work usually with finitely generated over R. This definition of affine fibration is due to Avinash Sathe, and I'm very happy to see that he is in our audience. And R algebra, so yeah, factorial, geometrically factorial. This notion is will not be used in the proof, but it helps that I will call a ring A to be geometrically factorial if if you tensor it with an algebraic closure of K, then it becomes a unique factorization domain. So where K bar is an algebraic closure of K. So we all know it may happen, and maybe there are some students in the audience, they can check that even if the ring A is a UFD, A need not be geometrically factorial, and geometrically factorial does not necessarily imply that A is a UFD. So this is another definition. Now let's go back to this problem which we are investigating. So why this problem? So this problem is related to many other problems, but mainly to these two problems. This Zariski's cancellation problem. So this asks whether the polynomial ring in Kn n variable over a field K is cancellative. That is, if you have a ring A and if you adjoin one more variable to A, if it is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in n plus 1 variable over K, does this necessarily imply that A itself is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in n variables? So this is a very interesting problem. Is very easy to state, but we will see. So for n equal to 1, this problem was solved affirmatively by Abhyankar, Ekin and Heinze as early as 1972. In fact, their result was much more general. I'm writing it for UFD, but this result is true even for semi-normal rings. So if R is a unique factorization domain and A is an R algebra, then if you adjoin m more variables to A and m plus 1 variable to R, and this isomorphism is an R algebra isomorphism, then it will imply that A is R isomorphic to a polynomial ring in one variable over R. So you can cancel out M. So from this theorem, one can easily take R to be here A and A to be, okay, so there is a confusion. If we want to solve the ZCP for n equal to 1, in this case, R is equal to A and A is my kx1, x2. A is, yeah. So this is what we can do. Now for n equal to 2, this was a very difficult, non-trivial problem. It took a long time to get it solved. Many results were in between needed to solve this. And it was proved for characteristic 0 by Miyanishi and Sugi with an important contribution due to Fujita. And soon this result was generalized over perfect field by Peter Russell. And recently, anyway, I think this was known even before that this result is true for any field K, irrespective of the characteristic. But for n greater than equal to 3, I have shown that for a positive characteristic, the answer is no. And this is where these threefolds do come in the picture, and we will be discussing how we will get a counterexample to the ZCP for n equal to 3 in this talk. For n greater than equal to 3, if in characteristic 0, this problem is still open, and we have candidate counter examples, but we don't know how to solve them, how to crack them. So this is a very, very interesting and open problem in characteristic 0. Another important problem related to this threefold is this embedding or epimorphism problem for hyperplanes, which asks that if G is a polynomial in n variables, kxn up to xn, and suppose G is an hyperplane, that is, if kxn up to xn mod G is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in n minus 1 variable, does this necessarily imply that G is a coordinate in kxn up to xn? That is, whether you can get an automorphism of kx1 up to xn, which will replace one of this xi by G. So this is a problem. For n equal to 2, this was a non-trivial result, an important landmark in the history of affine algebraic geometry. and it was proved by Abhyankar Moe and independently by Suzuki in characteristic 0. However, a counterexample was already known in positive characteristic that this result is not true for n equal to 2 in characteristic 0. And this counterexample is this Segre-Nagata polynomial. So if you take this G to be this polynomial zp square plus t to the power sp, where p is a characteristic and s is specially chosen such that p does not divide s, then f is a non-trivial line in kzt. And this non-trivial line is an example. That is, if you have kzt mod f, then it is k1, but f is not an coordinate. So, yeah, and this non-trivial line one can extend in higher dimension also to get counter example for every integer n in positive characteristic. So, an Abhyankar-Sathe's conjecture asserts that this should, the answer to this epimorphism problem should be yes for characteristic 0 for any integer n. And this is a very long-standing conjecture, and still we don't have much progress in this question. Very special cases have been solved for n equal to 3. One of the special case which is related to this talk is this linear polynomial in Y. So which was proved to be a coordinate in kx linear polynomial in Y, kxyz, in the polynomial ring kxyz. Sathe proved that if kxyz mod g is k2, then g is a coordinate for characteristic 0. And soon this result was generalized over a perfect field or positive characteristic by Peter Russell. So we will this threefold which we are discussing. This is a slight generalization of this for the case n equal to 4, and we will be seeing that. But how do we achieve at this? So what are the tools which we will be required to investigate this threefold? Is the GA action. So GA is the additive group K plus, where K is the field. So K plus is an algebraic group. It's a very important group action have been a very important theme in the history of algebra, and there have been many results, fundamental results in the group actions, but usually they are related to finite groups or reductive groups. But K plus is not a reductive group, it's an unipotent group, and the ring of invariant is not necessarily finitely generated, which makes the study of this group action GA a very non-trivial thing. Still, sometimes these are quite useful objects to look into. The ring theoretic formulation of this group action is called an exponential map on a ring A. It's a ring homomorphism from a ring A to the polynomial ring in AU, where U is a coordinate. We sometimes write phi U to denote this extra U, satisfying the following two properties corresponding to the two axioms of the group action. So these are the two action group conditions which this group homomorphism should satisfy. That is, phi U from, if this composition map from AU to A, phi U to compose with epsilon naught is an identity on A. So that is, whenever you define phi U on a constant C, it should be C plus some polynomial U times some polynomial. And further, this phi V composed phi U, where phi V is the same group ring homomorphism from A to AV, and V plus U is same A to A, U plus V, just you replace U by U plus V, U plus V. And then this composition should be same, that phi U compose phi V should be phi V plus U. So if you are in a finitely generated K algebra over an algebraically closed field and you write it geometrically, then you will get back the two group axioms needed for the group actions. So very simple example of an exponential map is that if you have a polynomial ring Kx and we define a K algebra homomorphism by setting phi U of x to be x plus U, so then one can easily see that this is a exponential map on the polynomial ring Kx. So Any questions so far, Miss? May I going fast or it's okay?
No, there are no questions. It is fine for me. This speed is okay. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Then let me proceed. So after this, we will define the ring of invariants. So whenever there is a group action, there is a ring of invariant. The ring of invariant of an exponential map phi on a ring A is denoted by A phi. So it's a collection of all elements of A which are fixed by phi. So one can easily see that this makes us subring of A. There are many interesting properties of the ring of invariant. There are inert subring, factorially closed, algebraically closed, and so on. But I will not be getting into that. So we say an exponential map phi is non-trivial. Non-trivial means if A phi is a proper subring of A. That is, phi is just not the identity map. If phi is identity map A to A, then the ring of invariant is whole of A, if and only. So it's non-trivial if A phi is not equal to A. So for example, in the exponential map phi of x is x plus u, in this previous example, the ring of invariant is nothing but k, because it's only the constants which are fixed. Any polynomial in x is changing. What's happened? What is this?
I think you have to choose that file, that PDF file. Open the PDF file.
Yeah.
Click on.
Maybe
what if you? Yeah.
I'm not so good in laptop, and then when this is coming, suddenly this pop-ups comes whenever there is an email. Anyway, so let's proceed. So in the exponential map phi on kx, which was defined by phi u of x is x plus u, the ring of invariant is nothing but the constants. So with the help of this ring of invariants, we can define many new invariants of the ring. So, but in general, means it's very difficult. It's a very difficult and in fact an open problem to classify all the exponential maps of a ring. Given a ring, for instance, exponential maps of polynomial rings in one variable over a field k is trivial. In fact, these are the all. In polynomial rings in two variables k, x, y, it can be classified, and there are results due to Rensler and Miyanishi. But for n greater than or equal to 3, it's very difficult to classify all the exponential maps. Still, even if we don't know what are all exponential map, but we know a few examples, we can define some invariant. So this is this invariant defined by Dirksen, and it's very useful. Invariant of the ring A. So this Dirksen invariant of a ring A is a subring of A generated by the all ring of invariants of exponential map. So given any non-trivial exponential map, you look at this subrings A phi and generate the ring. So we vary phi over all exponential maps, and then we define the Dirksen invariant. So a question might occur that, okay, if we don't know what are all exponential map, how can we know what is the Dirksen invariant of a ring A? So it's a very difficult problem, but sometimes you need not know what are all exponential maps. For example, one can see that the Dirksen invariant of the polynomial ring in n variable, if n is greater than 1, is the polynomial ring Kn itself. That every element, this does not mean that every element in the polynomial ring Kn is in the ring of invariant of an exponential map. Say for instance, this is a subring generated by A phi. If we just take the union of all A phi, that is not going to be a ring. We need to take the subring generated by that, ring generated by that. Therefore, it does not mean that every element in the Dirksen invariant must be killed by some exponential map. So let's prove this lemma. It's not difficult. So let A be this polynomial ring kxn up to xn in n variable, and for each integer I, 1 less than equal to I less than equal to n, we define an exponential map phi I from the polynomial ring A to this ring AU is a K-algebra homomorphism which sends every xj where I is not equal to j, and for ith coordinate xi, it takes it to xi plus u. So we can see that each xj for I not equal to j is in the ring of invariant. Therefore, a phi I is kx1 up to xi minus 1, I plus 1 and n. So if you vary, just you take some say I equal to 1 and I equal to 2, and you look at the Dachshund invariant of a phi 1 and a phi 2, you will get the ring to be whole of A. So in this way, means at least this is an invariant of a polynomial ring. Therefore, if you have a finitely generated K algebra of transcendence degree greater than 1, and if you prove that the Dachshund invariant is a proper subring of A, it will imply that A is not a polynomial ring over K. So this is the corollary which we will be using to investigate the threefold which we are discussing. We will prove that if the threefold means we will set out some conditions, and if those conditions are not satisfied, then the Dachshund invariant is a proper subring of it. So now let me come back to my theorem. So this is the theorem. I have shown it in the previous slide also in the last lecture. So, but let me recall it again. So A is a polynomial ring quotiented by this polynomial, and m is an integer which is greater than 1. Let us, for simplicity, call this polynomial to be G and small f to be the projection on the zt plane, that is f0 zt, and let small x, y, z, small z, means the small letters, denote the images of capital A. Then we have proved the equivalence of some 10 statements. So for suppose this ring A is a polynomial ring in 3 variables, is this condition is also necessarily an equivalent to the say that A is a polynomial ring over the subring Kx, where x is this image of capital X, and which is same as saying that this small f is coordinate in zt. So we have seen that if small f is z plus z, or this capital F is z, then it's easy to see that G is a coordinate and therefore A is a polynomial ring. But this is also an equivalent condition that small f is a coordinate in Kz, is a variable. And which is same as saying that this G is a coordinate or a variable in the polynomial ring Kxyzt. And not only that, it's equivalent to say this G is a polynomial coordinate along with X. So X comma G, both of them form a pair. Further, we have shown that A is a stably polynomial ring for some integer L greater than equal to 0, and Dachshund invariant of A is the whole of A, will imply that A is a polynomial ring. So this is what happened in the case of acinamous threefold, which is contained in this family, that acinamous threefold were stably polynomial ring, but we proved that the Dachshund invariant is a proper subring. So in fact, these are all equivalent conditions. Further, A is an A2 fibration over Kx, and the Dachshund invariant is whole of A. So this now all the conditions will require the Dachshund invariant hypothesis. And Kzt mod f is K1 if and only dk is the Dachshund invariant is whole of A. So if f is a line and the Dachshund invariant is whole of A, then also we have A is a polynomial ring, and the Dachshund invariant is whole of A, and this is where this K theory do comes. But yeah, probably it could have been avoided by some other means. Very elementary K theory have been using. This is the Whitehead group, K1 of A is K star. So if A is a polynomial ring, it's easy to see that K1 of A is K star. And A over K is geometrically factorial. And finally, this K1 condition can be replaced by the hypothesis that if you go modulo X, A mod XA, the units are trivial. That K star is the only set of units. There is no further units in A mod XA. So we will be essentially, our aim is to prove this theorem. I will not be actually proving the whole equivalence statements, equivalence of all the statements, but I will be proving the trivial ones. Of course, yeah. So I will just see how far we can go. What's the consequences of these results? So consequences is that for any field K and G be this polynomial, we see that this ring A is a polynomial ring in 3 variables if and only if this f0zt is a variable, is a coordinate in kzt. Thus, this implies very general result, and in a very simply we can see the non-triviality of the Russell-Koros threefold defined by this equation. So this is where in this we can see that what is f0z is z square plus t cube, which can never be a variable in kz. It's a quadratic polynomial, degree 2. So it can never be a coordinate with no linear term. Therefore, this threefold, Russell-Koros threefold, can never be a polynomial ring, which was a difficult problem. But with this general result, this follows just as very easily. Another thing is that if A is a polynomial ring in 3 variables, then kxyzt is a polynomial ring over the subring x comma g. So this is this generalization answering the epimorphism problem, a very special case of epimorphism problem for this special polynomial g, and it extends partially this result of Sathe and Russell for the case n equal to 4. Another thing is this is related to this A2 fibration, that A is isomorphic to a polynomial ring in 3 variables if and only if it's a polynomial ring over the subring kx. So we can see that if it is a non-trivial A2 fibration, means if it is a non-trivial A2 fibration, then it's never going to be a polynomial ring, and therefore this is never going to be a variable. So f0zt is going to be a non-trivial line. So it's never going to be a variable, but if it has to be an A2 fibration, it has to be a line. This we will see in a lemma next, which is coming next. So this part, that A2 fibration, will imply that it's a line, and non-triviality will imply that it has to be a non-trivial line. So another consequence follows from one more addition. So we had these 3 questions. So the first question was, when is A a stably polynomial ring? Here we have only a partial answer to this. So we proved that if f0zt is a line in kzt, then A is going to be a stably polynomial ring. There is a solution for this problem in stable case, means a complete solution, that if and only if kind of thing. But this is just a if condition, that if it's a non-line, then A is going to be a stably polynomial ring. This was a generalization of a result of Asanuma in his 1987 paper. And from this, we see that we have a counterexample to the Zariski's cancellation problem in positive characteristic. So if f0z is a non-trivial line, then A can never be a polynomial ring. This is what this theorem says, that it's if it is a variable, then only it's a polynomial ring, if and only. So if it's not a variable, then it f0z is not a variable, then it cannot be a polynomial ring. So, and if it's a line, it's a stably polynomial ring. Therefore, we have a counterexample to the Zariski's cancellation problem in positive characteristic for n equal to 3. And why positive characteristic? Because such non-trivial lines do exist only in positive characteristic. Otherwise, no concept of characteristic is used. It's a conceptual result. If this, then this will happen. Another result which we proved in this paper was we studied the isomorphism class of these three folds where small f is any non-trivial line. So we proved, so we can see there are two things which we can vary. So this is this integer m which we can vary, and this polynomial f which is a non-trivial line. So we proved that two such rings are isomorphic if and only if this integer m is same as n and f and g are equivalent. So equivalent by I mean, so they are f and g are polynomial in Z and T, which is a UFD. So they are associates of each other. They generate the same ideal. Then only these two rings are isomorphic. So if we can vary this integer m, then we will get an infinite family of non-isomorphic rings which are all stably isomorphic to the polynomial ring because of this result, because it's a non-trivial line, so they are all stably polynomial ring. But if m is not equal to n, then these two rings are not isomorphic, and therefore we have an infinite family of non-isomorphic rings which are stably isomorphic. So now comes this easy observations. These are just not results, these are observations we can easily see. So those notations are as before, and I'm assuming A to be an integral domain. So these conditions are equivalent. A is a unique factorization domain. This small x, which is an image of capital X, is a prime element in A, or it's a unit in A. And it's same as saying small f is a irreducible polynomial in KZT, or small f is a constant unit. So all these conditions are equivalent. So the proof of one implies two. So if once we assume that A is a unique factorization domain, primality is same as irreducibility. So it's enough to show that X is irreducible, or X is a prime element. Then showing X is irreducible, one can see that because A is an integral domain and X is a non-zero divisor, therefore A is a subring of inverting X. A is a subring of A X inverse, which is Kx X inverse ZT, isomorphic to. And then one can see that either X is irreducible or X is a unit in A. The proof of 2 implies 1 uses Nagata's criteria of unique factorization domain. So inverting X, it's a polynomial in two variables, so it's going to be a UFD. And X is a prime element or a unit. So if it's a unit, then it's already a UFD. And if X is a prime element, therefore, by Nagata's well-known criteria, A is a UFD. And if unit, then there's nothing to show. And finally, the third condition follows from the fact that A mod XA is isomorphic to KZT mod small f 1. It's a polynomial ring in one variable. So if X is a prime element or an irreducible element, so then KZT mod f, f must be an irreducible polynomial. So 2 is same as A is a UFD. So if unique factorization domain, then X is a prime element, then A mod XA is a integral domain, and therefore F must be an irreducible element, or conversely. So this is a very easy observation. Another observation is regarding A2 fibration. So how we relate A2 fibration with these rings. These rings are as before. So A is an A2 fibration over the subring Kx is same as this A mod XA is K2, and small f is a line, that is KZT mod f is K1. So this is what I was referring to, the 10 equivalent conditions. So the equivalence of 1 and 2 follows from the definition of A2 fibrations. So how A2 fibrations? So if A is an A2 fibration over Kx, then all the fiber rings must be isomorphic to a polynomial ring. In particular, because A mod X is a prime element of Kx, the fiber ring of over X is A mod XA. And because X is a maximal ideal also, so A mod XA is A tensor Kp, where P is the prime ideal X, then that must be K2. So 1 implies 2 is just a definition of A2 fibration. And so suppose now we assume that A mod XA is K2, then this equivalence, which I have said in the last slide also, that A mod X is nothing but this KZT mod F K1. Then by Abhyankar Ikinen-Heinze, the result of cancellation problem, which I was stating in the first in previous preliminary slides, that if A mod XA is K2, then this KZT, we can cancel this. This will imply that KZT mod F is K1, because, yeah, so this is just the Abhyankar application of Abhyankar Ikinen-Heinze. Further, this 3 implies 1. We suppose 3 says that A mod, this KZT mod F is K1, then A mod X is nothing but K2. So the fiber at this point X is K2. So we will need to look at fibers at other points. So one thing you observe that it's very easy, that A is finitely generated and flat over Kx, because Kx is a PID. So all we need to show is the fiber conditions. And the fiber condition for X is equal to 0 is this, which is we are already assuming. So we need to look at prime ideas other than XKX. So if X does not belongs to P, then PKXX inverse is a prime ideal of KX 1 by X. But A 1 by X is nothing but a polynomial ring over KX 1 by X. Therefore, the fibers must be again a polynomial ring over the point K, P. This A is an A2 fibration over K. So it's a A2 fibration. This ring A, which we are studying, is already an A2 fibration except at the point X. X is equal to 0. So this is where we need to have some conditions. So so this is the necessary and sufficient condition for A to be a stably polynomial ring. Now we come to this. We have already defined what is an exponential map. I am slowly progressing towards the proof. So I should define a few other technical terms. Proper Z filtration. So filtrations, commutative algebraists, we have always been seeing and we are used to of working with it. This definition is probably slightly different. So it's a finitely generated K algebra where K is a field, and so proper Z filtration is a K-linear subspaces AN satisfying that all ANs are subring of AN plus 1. A is union of these proper subrings, and intersection of ANs must be 0. And this is this in product criteria, that if you have an element from AN but not in AN minus 1 and an element from AM but not in AM minus 1, then this product is contained in AN plus M but not in N plus M minus 1. So this is what it makes these conditions will be called a proper Z filtration. It's not always assumed. We call a proper Z filtration to be admissible if there exists a finite generating set gamma of A. So for A is a finitely generated K algebra. That does not necessarily imply that you can always have a finite generating set gamma of A. But if it's called admissible, if you have a finite generating set gamma of A such that for every integer n, we can find, and any element, say f in An, this f can be written as finite sum of monomials in the elements of gamma, and each of these monomials must be an element of A. Can be written as a finite sum of monomials in the elements of gamma. So we can write f as sum of some monomials, and the monomials are elements from gamma, and each of these monomials must be an element of An. So an example, this is actually a family of examples. Filtration, which is given by a graded structure of a finitely generated K algebra, is admissible. So suppose you have a finitely generated K algebra which is also graded, and you define the filtration using that graded structure. Then that filtration is going to be admissible, because you can take the generators and that generators will do the job. But there are examples of finitely generated K algebras with proper Z filtrations which are not admissible, and they are very non-trivial examples. These examples were pointed out by Degley. So one always should be careful while defining proper Z filtration which are admissible. And admissible is a necessary condition. Another concept which we will be required is this homogeneous exponential map is necessary to understand the theorem. So what is so suppose A is a graded ring, then it induces a usual graded structure to the polynomial ring AU, right? This element U we can define some any degree. So that will give a graded structure to this polynomial ring AU. So an exponential map phi on a graded ring A is said to be homogeneous if this ring homomorphism is a graded ring homomorphism. Phi from A to AU is a graded ring homomorphism, that is takes the graded element to the graded component. So if phi is an homogeneous exponential map, then it's easy to see that A phi is a homogeneous subring of A. So this is an exercise for the people who are interested in it. One can prove that A phi, the ring of invariant of phi, must be an homogeneous subring of A. So let's see one example. So let's take the polynomial ring kxy with the usual grading. That is degree of x is 1, degree of y is 1. It's a graded ring. Then one can define an exponential map phi 1 on from A to AU by fixing K algebra. This is a K algebra homomorphism defined by phi 1 of x is x and phi 1 of y is y plus u. So suppose I define the degree of u to be 1, then this is, one can see this is a graded ring homomorphism because this is degree 1, and degree 1, degree 1. Okay, so this is a graded ring homomorphism. Therefore, phi 1 is homogeneous, and in this case, the ring of invariant is Kx, which is a homogeneous subring. Another example on the same ring A, you define phi 2 of x to be x plus 2yu minus u square and phi 2 of y to be y minus u. So this is not homogeneous because if you want, this degree of u is in our hand, we can define. So if you want to define u some degree, then the degree of u must match the degree of y. And then from this, but y degree is 1 because we are working with the usual grading. So usual grading is 1, so it's 2 and it's 2, but x is 1. So this is not homogeneous. Okay, so with the usual grading, this is not a homogeneous exponential map. Now, in this case, the ring of invariant is x plus y square. Now, it's a very important result which have been repeatedly used in the theorem due to Duxon, Hudden, and Makar-Limonov is this on proper Z filtration, is that if you have a proper Z filtration on a ring A, then you can define a graded ring A by defining grade A to be the direct sum of AI mod AI minus 1, because AI minus 1 is a subspace of AI. So this quotient is a vector space over K. So it's a group, it's a K algebra, it's a K module. And then you take the direct sum, you can define the multiplication as the usual multiplication. So it's a graded ring. And we have a not homomorphism, we have a map from A to grade A, which sends any element of A to A plus an minus 1, where n is the, I should say, the largest thing where it belongs to. Or I should say, the smallest thing where it belongs to. So it belongs to an, but not in an minus 1. Then we will send it to the nth component of this graded piece. With easy examples, which I have not accommodated in the slide, it's not a group ring homomorphism. It does not preserve addition, but because it's a proper Z filtration, it preserves multiplication. That row AB is row A times row B, but it does not preserve addition. Row A plus B is not row A plus row B. It's an important theorem due to Duxon, Hudson, and Makar-Limonov is this, that if A is an finitely generated K algebra over a field K with an admissible proper Z filtration, so this filtration is already given, but this filtration must be admissible, and grade A with the induced Z-graded domain defined as above. And if phi is a non-trivial exponential map on the ring A, then thus phi induces a non-trivial homogeneous exponential map phi bar on grade A, satisfying that the ring of invariant A phi, if you look at the row image of A phi, it will be contained in the ring of invariant of phi bar of grade A. So this is a very important theorem which we have been using repeatedly in the proof. So the idea of the proof is you start with a finitely generated K algebra and you keep on defining some Z filtration suitably. That depends, means you will use some techniques to know what you need to define. So you define some admissible proper Z filtration and start with a non-trivial exponential map and use this result to move from A to grade A and phi to phi bar. And keep on doing this and finally you get some contradiction. So now the proof I have broken up into several steps. So there are two propositions. Proposition 1 is required in proposition 2 and proposition 2 is a proposition needed in our theorem. So there are several reductions. So let us begin. The proposition 1 is a threefold, but we are not looking at the whole capital F. We are just looking at small f, which is a polynomial in just two variables z and t. And this of do holds for m greater than equal to 1, but finally it will be required for m greater than equal to 2. So this proof of this proposition we will be skipping. Suppose B is a graded subring. So now one can see that so for the time being we assume that this is an integral domain. That will be same as asking, which will be the case in most of our result. So this ring B is a subring of kx x inverse zt, and so kx x inverse zt is a graded ring. What's the graded structure? I will assume that z and t has degree 0 and x has degree -1. So this is a graded structure and B can be thought of as a subring of this graded ring by defining the graded component Bi to be B intersection kzt x to the power I. So B becomes a graded ring. Now suppose we on B we have a non-trivial homogeneous exponential map on the graded ring B, homogeneous. So it's the ring homomorphism is again graded homomorphism such that this element y, small y, is in the ring of invariant, satisfying this condition. If this condition is satisfied, this proposition will say that we choose an element w in the ring of invariant such that kzt is a polynomial ring over kw. So this z and t, we can have a change of automorphic variables which will make w to be one of the element in the ring of invariant. So this proof is little long, so I am skipping it, and it requires many other results of affine algebraic geometry, including this AEH and cancellation, many other things. So I will be skipping this proof. So this is the most technical part. So what are the key things? Inputs. Inputs is a non-trivial homogeneous exponential map with y in the ring of invariant. Then we can find W.
Nina, there is a question.
Yes, sir.
From Miyazaki. His question is
Yes.
whether Bi is contained in Bi plus 1.
No. So this Bi is not defining the filtration. Bi is the module, graded subspace.
Okay.
It's just kzt x to the power I.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to give a filtration, we have to use a different notation, say Ci, which is direct sum of Bi, I greater than equal to -1, -n or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, means I should have given more detailed discussion on filtration and how from a filtration we go to a graded ring and from a graded ring to a filtration. So yeah. So next is this proposition 2, which is a major technical step. in the proof of proposition theorem 1. So let A be this threefold which we are discussing throughout, and suppose now we assume that the Dachshund invariant is whole of A. If this is the case, then one can find Z1 and T1 in KZT and some polynomials A0 and A1 in one variable, such that Z1 and T1 is an automorphic pair, that KZT is same as KZ1 T1, and small f, okay, I should have defined what is small f, but small f is just capital F 0 ZT. Small f is a linear polynomial in T1. So that is by and change of automorphism of this polynomial ring KZT, you can write small f as a polynomial which is linear polynomial in one of the coordinates, say T1. So apparently it may have many higher degree, but we can reduce it to this case. So this is probably the most important reduction, which helped us to deal with all the cases, means deal with this threefold in much more in this generality. Otherwise, the earlier cases which I have solved was a very special case where small f was a non-trivial line, and in this Russell-Koros threefold also, the small f was z square plus tq. So both of this does not satisfy this condition. So automatically it implies that the Dachshund invariant is not whole of A, and that will imply that A is not a polynomial ring. So if A happens to be a polynomial ring, this small f should be of this form. So this was probably a very difficult step, but let us prove. How do we prove? So, okay. So the basic assumption is the Dachshund invariant is whole of A. So if the Dachshund invariant is whole of A, we must have an exponential map for which the ring of invariant is not a subring of KXZT. So there is one exponential map which is not contained in this subring. Choose that exponential map, fix it. Now I will fix a filtration. So how do I define a filtration on this ring A? This ring A, for the all simplicity, I assume A is an integral domain, X is a prime element, because most of the cases we will be dealing with A is a polynomial ring. Assuming that A is a polynomial ring, so it will be an integral domain which is contained. So if I invert this X, then is a subring of Kx X inverse Zt, which is a graded ring, which is the same grading which I have defined earlier, that Zt, the degree is 0 and X has degree -1. Then using this grading of this ring, we define an filtration on the ring A by defining An to be A intersection direct sum of k zt x to the power I greater than equal to -n. And of course, in this case, an minus 1 is contained in an. Then, so this note, in this case, A is not a graded subring of this. A need not be a graded subring of this, but this filtration we can define, and this filtration has come from an induced graded structure of this ring. Therefore, it requires, of course, a proof that this is a admissible filtration, admissible proper Z filtration, and therefore, and grade A in this case, grade A in this case is the ring B, which we have discussed in the proposition 1. It's a capital F is gone. We are only boiled down to the study the special case FZT. So this is grade B. Now it's a graded ring with the graded ring with this degree. So this is the first step. We already have started with an exponential map with A phi is not contained in this. So if we use this result of Dirksen, Huddes and Makalimanov, then this phi will give rise to an exponential map of this graded ring B, which is I call phi bar, satisfying that the image of A phi is contained in grade A phi bar, that is B phi bar. Again, then we use the fact that A phi is not a subring of KXZT. So there is at least one element of A phi which involves Y. So using that element which involves Y, we will prove that Y is in the ring of invariant of B phi bar. Now we can use our proposition 1 to show that there exists some change of variables of ZT such that this Z1, oh, I should have written B phi here. I think there's a typo here. Z1 is in the ring of invariant. Z1 is in B phi bar. And not only that, now, yeah, so this is one which we have obtained. Now the next step is this FZT, we write it as a polynomial in Z1 and T1. It's an automorphic pair, and Z1 is in the ring of invariant. So it can have as large as T1 degree as possible. But the fourth step is to show that this degree of T1 is less than equal to 1, and we conclude this. But showing that degree T1 is less than equal to 1 again involves a lemma, in fact 2 lemmas. So I will be skipping that proof. So a very brief sketch can be that because Z1 is in the ring of invariant, I may kill Z1. So I may say Z1 is equal to 0. Then this ring B, if I put Z1 equal to 0, or say this Z and T is same as Z1 T1. So if I put Z1 is equal to 0, it is Kx yt mod xm y minus f0t, and it's a polynomial in just one variable. Then we use the result in dimension 2. So this initially it was a dimension 3 problem. We reduce it to the dimension 2 problem, and from there we conclude that this T1 is equal to 1. So I will be skipping this. So this theorem 1 was if this is a polynomial ring, then FZT is a linear polynomial in T1. So it has been reduced to this case, and that is what I called this special case of theorem 1, that if F0ZT is a linear polynomial in T, and A happens to be a polynomial ring in 3 variables, which implies that the Dachshund invariant is whole of A, then this small f, which is my capital F0ZT, is a variable in KZT. So this proof, now this difficult part and technical part is over, and if there may be various ways to attack this problem, the easier way which I knew and I could solve it is by using a little bit of K theory, very elementary, but I am sure there are many, should be very easy way to solve this, that if F0ZT is this linear polynomial in T, then FZT must be a variable if A happens to be a polynomial ring. So A is a unique factorization domain and X is irreducible in A. Okay, so now let's come to the proof. So A happens to be a polynomial ring. So of course, A is a UFD, and by the lemma which we have studied before, X is an irreducible element. So, and it's a prime element. So A mod XA, which is nothing but this, is an integral domain. So it's an integral domain. So what does this imply? That small f zt must be an irreducible polynomial in kzt. So that implies that a0 z plus a1 z t is an irreducible polynomial in zt. So what are the necessary conditions for this to be an irreducible polynomial? That is, this a0 z and a1 z, they should not have any common factor. So they must be co-maximal. So let us deal with two cases. The case one, where a1 z is 0. So if a0 z is irreducible and we are assuming K is algebraically closed, then fzt must be a linear polynomial in Z and hence a variable. So there is nothing much to prove. So assume that a1z is not equal to 0. So that is the another special case of theorem 1, that we assume that a1z is not equal to 0 and A is this polynomial ring in 3 variables. That is a1z is k star. Then we prove that if a0, we have already seen that this is a irreducible polynomial. Therefore, they are pairwise co-maximal. A0z and a1z are co-maximal. So a mod xa, because it's this ring a0z plus a1z t, is isomorphic to kz 1 by a1z. So it's require a little bit of work for undergraduates, or maybe graduates. We need localizations for that. That it's same as 1 by a1z y, to use co-maximality. So now to show that so let's R be the number of, so we know that fzt is a variable. So if a1 happens to be a unit, say a constant, scalar 1, then of course it's t plus some polynomial in z is a coordinate. So what we will show that a1z is a constant. So for the time being, let us assume that R is the number of irreducible factors of a1z, and we will show that R is equal to 0. And for that, we need a little bit of results from K theory. So I am overshooting. Please do stop me if there's no time, but just it's not take much time. So very elementary results from K theory. So this K theory is results that for a regular ring, K groups are stable. That is, all the K groups Ki for Rn is same as Ki of R for every integer n, I greater than equal to 0. This is for a regular ring. And for TT inverse, R TT inverse, it's same as K naught of R. K naught is same as K naught of R, that is, and K1, Ki for I greater than 0 is Ki of R, direct sum Ki minus 1 of R. So this is results which we will be using. And if R is a regular ring and R mod XR and Rx inverse are all regular rings, then we have a long exact sequence of the K groups, which are usual. It's like the usual homology groups, which are very useful for computation. So from K2 Rx inverse, again K1 R mod XR, K1 R, K1 Rx inverse, then K naught R. So it's a, so the three components in each I is R mod XR, R and Rx inverse. It's impossible for me to describe this what's the homomorphism in these cases, but one can read it up in a next paper by Bhatwadekar and Swapnil. We have made an attempt to describe these maps. One can probably read that. So another thing, that if we have an injective ring homomorphism phi from a ring R to B, it induces a map phi star from K1 of R to K1 of B. And so K1 is the Whitehead group. It's a isomorphism class of the GLN mod SLN. So it's always have the units contained in K1 of. So R star is the group of units of R. It's contained in K1 R. It's always contained in R. So under this map phi star, R star is always mapped injectively into the subgroup B star. So these are some basic things which I will be using. Now let's come back to the proof. So we assume that A is a regular ring, it's a polynomial ring, and X, the inverting X is again a regular ring, and A mod XA, we have seen this to be, A mod XA is this ring, KZ, 1 upon A1Z and Y, which is again a regular ring. So we have this long exact sequence of K theory from the K theory. And what is this map? J star is the inclusion induced by the inclusion map from A to AX inverse. And delta is this connecting K theory map, connecting morphism of these groups. Now let eta denotes the inclusion map from the field K inside A. So eta will define a map eta star from K1 of K to K1 of A. And if we compose this with J star, then K star will be mapped injectively into the units of this ring AXX inverse. Therefore, now because we are assuming A to be a polynomial ring and A is a regular ring, therefore K1 of A is same as K1 of K by hypothesis, by the first result of K theory. It follows that K1 of K is nothing but K star. For a field K, it's K star. It follows that this map is an isomorphism, and therefore this and K star is always sitting inside this. The map K1 of A is to K1 of AX inverse. So this map to this map is injective, because K1 of A is K star and K star is sitting injectively into this. Therefore, this map is injective. So this delta must be surjective. So delta is surjective, and we now come to this. Now delta is surjective. Now we also have we can also obtain similarly exact sequence like this for defining the taking from the long exact sequence of kx. So if we look at kx, kx inverse and k, then we have this long exact sequence, and from there we have this, and use this fact that this map is a flat homomorphism. So this is again a result from K theory, which I have not stated below. It induces this commutative diagram. So from kx inverse sitting into ax inverse k1 of k to k1 of k mod x. Now this is an isomorphism because ax inverse is kx inverse and 2. So it's ax inverse is a polynomial ring over this. So this must be an isomorphism because A is a regular ring, and this map this map is surjective. So this composition is surjective. So phi star must be surjective. This is an isomorphism. This is surjective. So phi star must be an surjective map. But what is K1 of K? K1 of K is K star. And what is K1 of A mod XA? Now recall what is, so this is just what I was telling orally. Now what is A mod XA? A mod XA is nothing but KZ 1 by A1ZY. So it's a regular ring. So Y is anyway will not, K1 is stable, so it does not matter. And this is a PID. So K1 of this ring is nothing but K star direction Z to the power R. But this map we have seen earlier is surjective. So K star mapping onto this is surjective, which is a canonical isomorphism. So K star is mapping onto this K star only. So this component must be 0. So this component is 0 is saying that R must be 0. And this completes the, or it's a little bit of sketch of the proof of this main theorem. Do I have time? Otherwise my proof is complete.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah. Audience can